Most people believe you need a massive piece of land to grow your own food, raise animals, and build a life that can actually support a family. They imagine endless acres of farmland, giant red barns, expensive tractors, and thousands of dollars just to get started. But what if that belief was completely wrong? What if one single acre could quietly produce vegetables, eggs, meat, fruit, milk, compost, and even a steady stream of income all year long? And what if the secret was not the size of the land, but the layout? Because across the world, a new generation of homesteaders is proving something shocking. Small land is no longer a limitation. In fact, some of the most productive farms on Earth are built on tiny pieces of property. Every square foot is designed with purpose. Every animal serves a role. Every system feeds another system. Nothing is wasted. And once everything begins working together, that 1 acre stops behaving like ordinary land. It becomes a machine. A machine capable of feeding families, reducing grocery bills, generating small farm income, and creating a level of independence most people have never experienced before. Right now, food prices continue climbing. Grocery shelves become more unpredictable every year. And more people are starting to ask the same question. What happens if I could produce my own food instead? That is exactly why profitable farming on small land is exploding in popularity. Backyard farming, micro-farming, and homesteading for profit are no longer just hobbies. For many people, they are becoming serious farm business ideas and powerful farming side hustles. And today, we are walking through one of the smartest 1-acre homestead layouts designed for maximum food production and long-term farm ROI. This is not about fantasy. This is about strategy. Because most beginners fail before they even plant their first crop. They place animals in the wrong areas. They waste space. They ignore water systems. They buy the wrong livestock. And within months, the homestead becomes expensive, exhausting, and inefficient. But the layout you are about to see changes everything. Picture standing at the entrance of this property early in the morning. The air is cool. The ground is still wet from overnight rain. You hear chickens moving through the grass before you even see them. Somewhere farther back, quail begin chirping from their enclosed pens. Rabbits quietly chew feed in shaded hutches, while fruit trees sway gently around the perimeter of the land. And at the center of it all is a system where every part supports another. The chickens fertilize the soil. The compost feeds the garden. The garden scraps feed the rabbits. Rainwater hydrates the crops. Fruit trees provide shade for smaller animals. Nothing here exists alone. That is the true secret behind profitable small farm systems. Not bigger land. Better integration. And the first thing this acre gets right is zoning. Most people treat land randomly. They place structures wherever space is available. But successful homesteads organize land based on daily movement and efficiency. Closest to the house sits the kitchen garden. This becomes the most visited area on the property because it contains fast-growing vegetables and herbs used almost every single day. Tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, green onions, basil, spinach, crops that are harvested constantly need to stay close for convenience. That alone saves time and energy every single day. Beyond the kitchen garden sits the chicken zone. And this is where the homestead truly begins producing serious value. For beginners entering small-scale farming, chickens remain one of the best farm animals possible. They are relatively affordable, easy to manage, and incredibly productive. A small flock can produce eggs almost daily while also supplying manure for compost systems. But the smartest homesteaders never keep chickens in one place for too long. Instead, they use mobile systems, chicken tractors, portable fencing, rotational grazing. This allows chickens to naturally fertilize fresh sections of land while reducing odor buildup and pest problems. The birds scratch through grass, hunt insects, and loosen soil all at the same time. In other words, the chickens work for the homestead, and that changes everything. Because once animals begin contributing labor instead of creating constant maintenance, the farm becomes more profitable and sustainable. Now imagine walking deeper into the property. The sounds begin changing. You hear softer movement now, more controlled, more compact. This section belongs to quail, and most people completely underestimate them. Quail farming might be one of the most overlooked profitable livestock systems in modern homesteading. These tiny birds require surprisingly little space, consume less feed than chickens, mature quickly, and begin laying eggs at an incredible pace. For people interested in homestead income or backyard farming, quail offer a powerful advantage. Efficiency. A small enclosed setup can produce dozens of eggs weekly while occupying only a fraction of the land required for larger animals. And unlike chickens, quail are quieter, easier to contain, and often more accepted in suburban environments where traditional livestock restrictions exist. But the biggest advantage is reproduction speed. Quail mature fast, extremely fast, which means a tiny starter group can expand rapidly if managed correctly. That is why many people entering farming for beginners start with quail as their first profitable livestock system. Low risk, low startup cost, high reproduction, fast output. And when integrated into a larger 1-acre homestead, they become one of the smartest uses of limited space. But surprisingly, quail are not the fastest multiplying animals on this property. That title belongs to another section entirely. A section many people initially ignore because the animals look too small to matter. Rabbits. At first glance, rabbit farming does not look impressive. No loud noises, no giant structures, no dramatic movement. But behind those quiet hutches is one of the most powerful micro-farming systems in existence. Rabbits reproduce at astonishing rates. A healthy breeding pair can quickly expand into an entire production system capable of supplying meat, fertilizer, and breeding stock for additional income. And unlike larger livestock, rabbits require very little land. That makes them perfect for profitable small farm layouts where every square foot matters. Now picture rows of shaded hutches protected from direct afternoon heat. Beneath them, manure naturally collects for composting. Nearby, garden scraps and excess greens become supplemental feed. Again, the systems connect. Nothing gets wasted. That is the difference between ordinary farming and intelligent homestead design. Every output becomes another input. Every problem becomes another opportunity. And once those cycles begin forming naturally, operating costs start dropping dramatically. This is where many people begin realizing something important. A 1-acre homestead is not just about survival. It can become a real business. Because small farm profit rarely comes from one single source. The most successful homestead businesses stack multiple income streams together. Eggs, quail eggs, rabbit breeding, vegetable sales, fruit harvests, compost, seedlings, meat production. Each system may seem small individually, but together they create stability. If one income stream slows down, another continues producing. That is exactly why diversified small farm animals create stronger farm ROI than relying on only one large operation. But there is another animal on this acre that changes the emotional energy of the entire property. Nigerian dwarf goats. The moment people see them, something shifts. These animals are compact, intelligent, playful, and surprisingly productive. Unlike larger goat breeds, Nigerian dwarf goats require less space while still producing valuable milk for small homestead families. And demand for them continues growing. Many homesteaders choose them because they're easier to manage than larger dairy goats while still fitting perfectly into small-scale farming systems. But their real power comes from versatility. Milk, breeding, companionship, brush clearing, manure production, multiple functions from one small animal. Now imagine these goats moving through carefully fenced rotational grazing sections surrounded by fruit trees at the edge of the property. Their manure improves soil fertility, while controlled grazing helps manage vegetation naturally. Again, another cycle forms, another connection, another layer of efficiency. That is why layout matters more than land size. The acre itself is not magical. The design is. And one of the smartest parts of this design happens underground and overhead at the same time. Water. Most failing homesteads underestimate water systems completely. They depend entirely on expensive external water sources, while ignoring free rainwater falling directly onto the property. Successful homesteads think differently. They collect it. Roof runoff flows into storage tanks. Barrels connect to gutters. Overflow channels redirect excess water toward gardens and trees. This single system can dramatically reduce long-term operating costs while protecting crops during dry periods. But water alone is not enough. The soil must also stay alive. That is where compost becomes one of the most important engines of the entire acre. And most people never realize how valuable compost truly is until they begin farming. Because healthy soil changes everything. Healthier vegetables, better yields, stronger root systems, lower fertilizer costs, higher long-term productivity. Now picture a compost section quietly working behind the scenes. Chicken manure, rabbit waste, garden scraps, dead leaves, old plant material. Everything breaks down slowly into dark, rich compost capable of feeding the entire property. This is the hidden heartbeat of the homestead. Not flashy, not dramatic, but absolutely essential. Because once a farm begins producing its own fertility naturally, dependence on expensive outside inputs starts disappearing. And that is the moment a homestead becomes truly powerful. Not when it looks impressive online, not when it has expensive buildings, but when the systems become self-sustaining, when the property begins feeding itself, when every corner has a purpose. And we're only getting started, because deeper inside this acre lies one of the most productive sections of the entire property. A system capable of producing massive amounts of food in surprisingly little space, while dramatically increasing homestead income potential. And most beginners make one critical mistake before they ever build it. The most productive section of this entire 1-acre homestead is not the chicken zone. It is not the rabbits. It is not even the Nigerian dwarf goats. It is the garden system. Because while livestock creates valuable protein and income, the garden becomes the engine that feeds both the animals and the people living on the property. And most beginners completely underestimate how much food a properly designed garden can actually produce. The difference between an average garden and a highly productive homestead garden comes down to one thing: space efficiency. Most people grow outward. Smart homesteaders grow upward. The moment vertical growing systems are introduced, an ordinary garden transforms into a food-producing machine. Tomatoes climb upward on trellises. Cucumbers hang vertically. Pole beans stretch toward the sky instead of spreading across valuable ground space. Suddenly, the same amount of land begins producing nearly double the harvest. And on a profitable small farm, that matters enormously. Now imagine stepping into the center of this garden during peak growing season. Thick rows of leafy greens fill raised beds with deep, rich soil. Bright red tomatoes hang heavily from tall supports. Bees move between flowering plants while irrigation lines quietly drip water directly into the root zones. Everything here is intentional. Nothing is random. That is what separates productive homesteading from hobby gardening. Every crop must justify its space. High-yield vegetables dominate the layout because they provide the greatest return for the smallest footprint. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, zucchini, spinach, kale, peppers, onions. Crops capable of feeding a family consistently, while also creating opportunities for a homestead income. And then comes one of the most overlooked secrets in small-scale farming: companion planting. Certain plants naturally benefit each other when grown together. Some repel pests. Others improve soil quality. Some create shade that protects neighboring crops from intense heat. Once these systems begin working together, chemical dependence drops dramatically. Again, the property becomes more self-sustaining. Now, picture walking along the perimeter of the acre. Fruit trees line the outer edges like a living wall. Mango trees, guava, lemon, banana, apple depending on climate. These trees serve multiple purposes at once: food production, shade, wind protection, pollinator attraction, long-term income. That is the power of intelligent homestead systems. One feature solves multiple problems simultaneously. And unlike seasonal vegetables, fruit trees become long-term investments. Year after year, they continue producing with relatively low maintenance once established. But there's another reason the perimeter matters: security. Most beginners focus only on what happens inside the property. Smart homesteaders think about protection first, because predators become a serious issue once livestock enters the equation. Foxes, snakes, wild dogs, hawks, raccoons, even neighborhood pets. One weak point in fencing can destroy months of work overnight. That is why the smartest 1-acre layouts use layer protection systems, strong perimeter fencing, secure nighttime housing, elevated hutches, motion lights, rotational grazing sections designed to reduce vulnerability. Because profitable livestock quickly becomes expensive livestock when predators strike repeatedly. And speaking of expensive mistakes, there is one area where beginners lose money faster than almost anywhere else. Overbuying animals too early. Excitement destroys more homesteads than failure ever does. People buy too many chickens, too many goats, too many rabbits. They scale too fast before learning management systems. And suddenly feed costs explode. Cleaning becomes overwhelming. Disease spreads faster. The homestead stops feeling exciting and starts feeling exhausting. Successful farming for beginners works differently. Start small. Master systems. Expand slowly. That is how profitable farming actually grows. Not through speed, through control. And nowhere is that more important than feed management. Because feed becomes one of the largest recurring costs on nearly every small farm. The moment homesteaders reduce feed dependence naturally, profitability increases dramatically. This is why integrated farming systems matter so much. Garden scraps feed rabbits. Excess vegetables feed chickens. Certain trees provide goat forage. Compost systems recycle nutrients back into the soil. Even insects become part of the cycle. Black soldier fly larvae systems, for example, are becoming increasingly popular in backyard farming because they convert food waste into high-protein feed for poultry and fish. Again, another cycle, another connection, another reduction in operating cost. That is the hidden pattern throughout this entire acre. Efficiency. Everything here is designed to lower expenses while increasing output. And then comes one of the smartest additions of all, the greenhouse. At first glance, it may not look dramatic, just a simple enclosed structure covered in transparent material. But this single feature changes the productivity of the entire property, because the greenhouse extends growing seasons dramatically. Suddenly, vegetables can continue producing during colder periods. Seedlings can be started earlier. Sensitive plants gain protection from harsh weather. Certain crops become possible year-round, depending on climate. That means more food, more consistency, more potential homestead money. And consistency is everything when building a homestead business. Now imagine warm, humid air filling the greenhouse, while rows of thriving seedlings stretch toward filtered sunlight. Outside, weather conditions fluctuate constantly. But inside, production continues. That stability becomes incredibly valuable over time, especially during unpredictable seasons when outdoor crops struggle. And once food production becomes stable, another opportunity begins appearing naturally, selling surplus. This is where many homesteaders discover something unexpected. People are willing to pay surprisingly high prices for local farm products. Fresh eggs, organic vegetables, goat milk soap, quail eggs, breeding rabbits, homemade compost, herbs, seedlings, raw honey if bees are added later. The demand for local food continues growing every year because more people want transparency in what they consume. They want fresher products, healthier products, locally raised food, and small homesteads are perfectly positioned to supply that demand. That is why homesteading for profit has exploded online in recent years. People are realizing that small land does not automatically mean small opportunity. In fact, some micro-farming systems outperform larger farms in profit per square foot simply because they focus on efficiency and direct sales instead of massive industrial production. Now, picture a Saturday morning at a local market. Dozens of customers move slowly between booths searching for fresh products. Some stop to buy colorful vegetables harvested only hours earlier. Others purchase fresh eggs packaged in simple cartons with handwritten labels. And then there are the premium products. Quail eggs, specialty herbs, rabbit breeding stock, handmade goat milk soap. These smaller niche products often carry surprisingly strong profit margins because fewer people supply them. That is one reason Nigerian dwarf goats continue growing in popularity. Beyond milk production, they create opportunities for value-added products that increase overall farm ROI significantly. But none of these systems succeed without one thing: consistency. And consistency comes from routines. Every successful homestead eventually develops rhythms: morning feeding, water checks, egg collection, garden harvesting, fence inspections, compost turning, evening security checks. At first, those routines may sound exhausting to outsiders, but experienced homesteaders often describe something completely different: peace, because the property begins operating almost like a living ecosystem. Each day has structure. Each task has visible purpose. Over time, people stop feeling disconnected from their food because they become directly involved in producing it. And that emotional connection becomes one of the most powerful parts of the entire lifestyle, especially in a world where most food arrives wrapped in plastic from places people will never see. Now imagine the feeling of collecting breakfast directly from your own land. Eggs still warm from the nest boxes. Fresh tomatoes picked minutes before cooking. Herbs clipped directly from the garden. Goat milk processed from animals you raise yourself. That experience changes people. And it explains why so many individuals pursuing profitable farming eventually become deeply passionate about self-sufficiency itself. But despite all these advantages, one major challenge still threatens nearly every beginner homestead: burnout. Because social media often creates unrealistic expectations about farming life. Beautiful drone shots and cinematic harvest videos rarely show the difficult moments: extreme heat, animal illness, feed shortages, crop failures, predator attacks, water problems, infrastructure repairs. Those realities exist on every farm, and the people who succeed long-term are not the ones chasing perfection. They are the ones building resilience. That is why smart one-acre homesteads prioritize simplicity first. Simple systems survive stress better. Simple layouts reduce mistakes. Simple routines prevent overwhelm. The goal is not building the biggest homestead possible. The goal is building one that can operate sustainably year after year without collapsing under its own complexity. And surprisingly, the most successful small farm income systems often look far less glamorous than people expect. No giant machinery, no expensive infrastructure, no massive debt, just carefully designed systems producing reliable output consistently. That is the true power of small-scale farming: flexibility, adaptability, control. And there is one final section of this acre that quietly determines whether the entire homestead thrives or fails long-term. Because without this system, even the best livestock and gardens eventually begin struggling. The difference between a struggling homestead and a thriving one often comes down to something most people never think about: soil. Because underneath every successful garden, every healthy fruit tree, every productive pasture, and every profitable livestock system is living soil. And without it, the entire acre slowly begins falling apart. Most beginners focus only on visible production: more chickens, more goats, bigger gardens, more animals. But experienced homesteaders understand something deeper. The soil is the real farm. Everything else simply grows from it. That is why the smartest one-acre homesteads treat fertility like gold. Every fallen leaf, every pile of manure, every leftover vegetable scrap becomes part of a continuous nutrient cycle designed to keep the land alive year after year. Now, picture the compost area again. At first glance, it looks simple: just piles of decomposing organic material, quietly breaking down in the corner of the property. But over time, this section becomes one of the most valuable systems on the entire acre. Chicken manure adds nitrogen. Rabbit manure enriches soil texture. Dead leaves provide carbon. Garden scraps feed microbial life. Rainwater maintains moisture. Heat builds naturally inside the piles as decomposition accelerates. Weeks later, what once looked like waste transforms into dark, rich compost capable of feeding the entire homestead. And this changes everything. Because fertilizer is expensive, healthy soil is priceless. The moment a homestead begins producing its own fertility naturally, operating costs begin dropping dramatically. Crops become healthier. Water retention improves. Plant diseases decrease. Harvest yields rise. This is why experienced farmers often say that compost is not just dirt, it is stored productivity. And the most profitable small farm systems understand this better than anyone. Now imagine that compost being spread across raised beds before planting season begins. Rich black soil absorbs morning sunlight, while earthworms move beneath the surface. Seedlings transplanted into those beds suddenly explode with growth compared to weak chemically depleted soil. The difference becomes visible within weeks. Stronger stems, darker leaves, larger harvests. That is a hidden power of regenerative farming systems. Instead of constantly taking nutrients from the land, the homestead continuously rebuilds them. And over time, the property becomes more productive instead of less productive. That is incredibly rare in modern agriculture. Most industrial systems slowly exhaust the land. Smart homesteads heal it. And once the land becomes healthy, another major transformation begins happening. The acre starts producing serious food volume, far more than most people expect. Picture walking through this property during peak harvest season. Tomatoes overflow from vertical trellises. Egg baskets fill daily. Quail produce steadily from compact enclosures. Rabbits continue reproducing. Fruit trees hang heavy with ripe harvests. Goats graze peacefully beneath shaded sections of pasture. Herbs spill over garden borders, while pollinators move constantly between flowers. The property feels alive. Every section contributes something valuable. And that is the moment many people realize this lifestyle is no longer just about food. It becomes about freedom. Freedom from depending entirely on grocery stores. Freedom from unstable food prices. Freedom from consuming low-quality products with unknown origins. Freedom from feeling disconnected from survival itself. Because once people begin producing food with their own hands, their relationship with consumption changes permanently. Food stops feeling disposable. Waste decreases. Skills increase. Confidence grows. And for many families, the homestead becomes more than just a farm. It becomes security. Especially during uncertain economic periods when inflation rises and supply chains become unpredictable. Small-scale farming suddenly stops looking old-fashioned and starts looking intelligent. That is exactly why interest in backyard farming and homestead business systems continues exploding across the world. People are searching for control again, and 1 acre can provide far more control than most realize. But there is another side to this story most people online never discuss honestly enough. This lifestyle requires patience. Real patience. Because profitable farming does not happen overnight. Fruit trees take time. Soil takes time. Breeding systems take time. Infrastructure takes time. The first year often feels messy and experimental. Mistakes happen constantly. Crops fail. Fencing gets redesigned. Feeding systems change. Water systems improve slowly through trial and error, and that is completely normal. The most successful homesteaders are not the people who avoid mistakes. They are the people who adapt quickly without quitting. That is why starting small matters so much. A few chickens first, then a garden, then rabbits or quail, then goats, then expanded systems later. Layer by layer, skill by skill. That approach creates stable growth instead of chaos. And over time, the property evolves naturally into something incredibly powerful. A fully integrated homestead. Now, picture this acre 5 years later. The fruit trees are mature. The soil is rich and dark. The fencing systems are optimized. The greenhouse produces year-round. Animal routines run efficiently. Compost cycles operate continuously. Rainwater systems store thousands of liters naturally. The once empty acre has transformed into a living ecosystem producing food from nearly every direction. And perhaps most importantly, the property now produces options. Extra eggs can be sold. Extra vegetables can generate weekly income. Breeding stock can expand profits. Goat milk products can become premium local products. Quail eggs can target specialty markets. Seedlings can sell during planting season. Compost itself becomes valuable. This is where homesteading shifts from survival into true profitable farming. Multiple small income streams stacking together into one resilient system. That is the real secret behind small farm income. Diversification. Because relying on only one source of production creates vulnerability. But when dozens of systems operate together, the homestead becomes far more stable financially. If one crop struggles, livestock continues producing. If egg sales slow temporarily, vegetables still generate income. If weather damages one section, another survives. That resilience becomes incredibly valuable over time, especially in modern economies where many people depend entirely on one fragile income source. And surprisingly, some of the most successful homestead businesses today operate on very small land, not because they produce massive industrial volume, but because they maximize efficiency. Micro farming systems can generate surprisingly high farm ROI when carefully designed. Premium products, direct local sales, low transportation costs, lower infrastructure expenses, flexible production systems. Small farms can adapt much faster than giant operations. That flexibility becomes a massive advantage. Now imagine neighbors visiting this acre for the first time. Most arrive expecting something small and simple. Instead, they discover a property overflowing with productivity, food growing vertically, animals integrated intelligently, water systems functioning efficiently, compost cycles rebuilding soil naturally, fruit trees creating layered production zones. Everything connected, everything intentional. And the most surprising part is often the atmosphere itself. The homestead does not feel chaotic. It feels calm, purposeful, alive. Because once systems begin functioning together correctly, the property develops natural rhythm. Morning sunlight hits the garden first. Chickens begin scratching through fresh pasture. Goats move towards shaded areas. Quail calls softly from enclosed sections. Water drips steadily through irrigation systems. Wind moves through fruit trees planted years earlier. And beneath all of it, the land continues quietly producing food day after day. That vision explains why so many people are becoming interested in farming for beginners and profitable livestock systems right now. They are not only chasing income, they are chasing a different way of living, a slower rhythm, a more connected lifestyle, a sense of ownership over survival itself. And perhaps the most important lesson from this entire one-acre homestead is this. You do not need massive land to change your life. You need systems. You need efficiency. You need patience, and you need the willingness to start, because 1 acre, when designed intelligently, can become far more powerful than most people ever imagine. It can feed families, generate income, build skills, create security, reduce dependence, and reconnect people to something modern life has slowly pushed away, the ability to provide for themselves. That is the true power of homesteading, not perfection, not aesthetics, not internet trends. Real self-sufficiency, built one system at a time. And the people who begin learning these skills today may become far more prepared for the future than those who continue depending entirely on systems they cannot control. Because at the end of the day, land is more than property. Properly designed land becomes opportunity, and opportunity grows best in the hands of people willing to work patiently with it. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into profitable farming, small farm income, homesteading for profit, and smart livestock systems, make sure you subscribe to Herd and Harvest for more cinematic videos on self-sufficiency, profitable livestock, backyard farming, homestead business ideas, and modern farming strategies that can completely transform small land into something extraordinary. And before you go, tell us in the comments, if you had 1 acre of land starting tomorrow, what would be the very first thing you build?